Hello friends, today I will talk about a fantastic awesome adventure, action sci-fi, fantasy movie name, Avatar. A panoramic view well above the tree line of a beautiful, verdant rainforest frames the opening of the story. Images of Jake Sully, Sam Worthington, a wounded war veteran and former Marine, are intercut. He awakens in a massive spacecraft traveling to Pandora, a heavily forested moon that resembles Earth and orbits Polyphemus, a huge blue planet like Jupiter. He is one of several travelers who have all awakened after approximately 6 years of cryosleep while traveling to Pandora. He gets attended to by the employees of the spacecraft after drifting out of his resting pod in 0G. The Sully T-branded locker is opened by him. Tom, a scientist who was to be a part of a high-level initiative run by business and military planners to investigate the ecology and population of Pandora, was Jake's deceased twin brother, Jake claims. Jake and his brother are genetically identical, thus he was given the option to take up his brother's job with a corporate military organization and relocate thousands of light years away to an outpost on the world of Pandora. As his brother's body is being incinerated, Jake accepts the deal, acknowledging the ideas of being free and having a new start. Jake is one of several soldiers and civilians due to land on Pandora, which is around 4.3 light years away from Earth. They are being taken from the spaceship to Pandora in a shuttle at the moment. As Jake considers his new duty, we get glimpses of the base and its development as well as enormous mining machines removing soil in a vast quarry. All of the passengers are told to wear full-face breathing masks because the planet's atmosphere is too toxic for humans to survive. After 20 seconds of exposure, a person becomes comatose and dies 4 minutes later. Jake joins the other passengers in his wheelchair as they exit and take their initial steps onto the base, known as Hell's Gate, which is encircled by a tall perimeter fence, garnering him the nickname Meals on Wheels from some arrogant Marines. Through voiceover, he admits that during one of his tours of duty on Earth, he lost the use of his legs. He also notes that, while a spinal injury like his may be treated, doing so requires money, which is difficult to come by in the current economic climate. Jake arrives at a military briefing where Colonel Miles Quaritch, Stephen Lang, is speaking to the soldiers gathered there as well as some accompanying citizens. He tells them about Pandora's native people, the Na6, and reminds them that they are not in Kansas anymore. They are hard to kill, according to Quaritch, who has a significant number of scars on the side of his skull, and nearly everything out there will try to kill you. Even though it is his responsibility to keep his people alive, he asserts that not with all of you, he will fail in this endeavor. He goes on to say that they must adhere to the Pandora rules if they want to survive. Jake visits a scientific lab where he meets 2 Avatar program members, biologist Norm Spellman, Joel David Moore, and Dr. Max Patel, Dilip Rao. While humans are unable to breathe Pandora's air, the Avatar program allows a human to connect with their own avatar, a genetically created human Na6 hybrid, and conduct themselves as if they were a Na6 native. This information is revealed as Jake sees his own avatar for the first time. Jake will be able to walk and breathe air once more in his avatar body. The avatars closely resemble their human drivers in appearance. When Norm informs Jake that his avatar resembles him, Jake ponders idly replies that it resembles his late sibling. The program's science lead, Dr. Grace Augustine, Sigourney Weaver, awakens in a specially made pod that links her to her avatar and flips open the lid just as Jake and Norm go into the science department. Norm informs Jake that he has heard she prefers plants over people. She gets out of her pod and speaks to Norm in Na6. She turns to Jake after being satisfied with Norm's knowledge of the language. She informs him that while she needs his brother Tom, a PhD who spent 3 years training for the Pandora trip, she doesn't need Jake because he has no lab experience and has never been connected to an avatar. The irritable Grace is not impressed when Jake makes the implication that he is a quick learner. To face Parker Selfridge, Giovanni Ribisi, base commander and a representative of the Resources Development Administration, RDA, a company that manages all military and other people on the colony, Grace storms out to the base's control room. He informs her that when they are on the surface of the planet, Jake will act as a security escort for her team. Parker is informed by Grace that she requires a researcher, not a jarhead dropout. She doesn't think Jake will help her with her botanical studies in any way. Parker responds that he disagrees and claims that Jake was a lucky break for them. They can apply his military expertise in an avatar body to the operation's overall goal of mining the mineral unobtanium, a potent source of energy that sells for many millions per kilo and could bring affordable power back to a dying Earth because he is a perfect genetic match for the avatar intended for his twin brother. Win the hearts and minds of the locals, Parker says Grace, in order to secure their cooperation, is one approach to assist in achieving this goal. According to Grace, the military has executed numerous Na6 under the direction of Selfridge's operation. The following morning, back in the lab, Jake and Norm connect for the first time with their avatars. Jake's avatar awakens in a different room from the others and the staff. The first time Jake has attempted to walk since becoming paralyzed, he is making his handlers uncomfortable by moving too quickly and trying to walk. Jake is happy to be able to move his legs again. The Na6 are far stronger than humans and stand taller than them, sometimes closer to 12 feet, therefore they cannot be stopped by the human lab workers. He is instructed to halt and lie down again by a staff member when his long tail topples instruments. Jake brushes him off and dashes outside into the sunshine. He finds himself in a recreation area where other avatars are participating in sports and staff members are attending to various tasks while wearing protective gear. Jake encounters Grace's avatar, who is more patient than the real Grace, and who goes with him to the barracks where he is eventually urged to take a nap. Jake examines his neural queue, a lengthy appendage that resembles a braid of hair, before he settles down to sleep. He has a collection of hidden tendrils at the end of his line. The bond is broken when the avatar goes to sleep, causing Jake to awaken. In a later encounter, Jake meets Trudy Chacon, Michelle Rodriguez, a veteran marine pilot with whom he will spend several weeks familiarizing himself with his avatar and exploring Pandora. On her crew, Jake will be the door gunner. Col. Quaritch, who is doing weights, meets with Jake. The colonel tells Jake that after reviewing his service record, including one in Venezuela, he was impressed with what he had accomplished. Jake is forewarned by the colonel of the perils that await him on Pandora. He adds that he thinks the Avatar program is a joke but that it presents a chance for a special kind of surveillance mission. The colonel will make sure Jake gets the surgery he needs to regain use of his legs if Jake can learn and tell him what he wants to know about the Ingenious, how to convince them to leave the unobtanium ore deposits and how to hit them severely if they won't. The colonel leaves after putting on an amp suit, a bipedal exoskeleton used for missions on Pandora. Jake, Grace, Norm, and other passengers in Trudy's gunship fly across Pandora's surface after being relinked with his avatar. Grace and Norm start collecting plant samples and taking measurements as soon as the crew lands in a forest. Due to his circumstances, Jake becomes disoriented and stumbles into a field of helichoradian flowers. These blooms are fairly tall and contract when touched by Jake. When a hammerhead, heavily armored Titanothere confronts Jake, trouble ensues. Grace tells him not to shoot because else the animal will become enraged and charge. For firearms to have any impact, his armor is too thick. The only reason Jake is able to defend himself is because a second, panther-like Venator has approached him from behind and forced the Titan others to flee and encircle their young. Jake is then addressed by the Venator. When Jake is told to flee by Grace, the Venator chases him, separating him from his team. He is taken down by the animal and loses his gun, but is able to escape by opening his rucksack. The Venator roars over Jake as he jumps to safety. The hunt eventually ends near a waterfall. Jake's team looks for him, but Trudy informs them that they must return to base because night operations are prohibited. He won't last the night, according to Grace. Now that night has fallen, Jake can be seen making a spear out of a long stick. This time, a Na6 is observing Jake from above. The Na6 is ready to launch an arrow at Jake when tiny, ethereal, glowing beings fall on her bow, convincing her not to. They are extremely pure spirits, also known as the seeds of Eywa, the Na'vi's all-powerful god, as we find out later. The archer moves away. An entire pack of viper wolves is after Jake. He dips the tip of his spear into a liquid that resembles pitch and is flammable. He lights the end and wields it as a torch against the viper wolves that are surrounding him and baring their teeth and gnashing their jaws. Jake is attacked by the animals, he fights back, kills some, and is then overpowered by others. The archer that had been watching Jake enters the conflict on his side. She exterminates a few viper wolves while driving the others away. She compassionately puts several whimpering injured animals to sleep while praying for them. Jake makes an effort to thank her for assisting him in fending off the assailants. She responds to his gratitude with disgust, tells him it's all his fault, they didn't have to die, and that he should go back to his origins. If so, why did she help him? Jake queries. You have a heart of gold. Fear not, she clarifies. But dumb. Jake says he wants to learn and makes an attempt to climb a tree like his rescuer. He is ordered to go back, that sky people cannot be educated, and is horrified. The seeds of Eywa suddenly reappear and begin to fall onto the uneasy Jake. What are they? He queries. She responds, very pure spirits, and Jake is engulfed in them, leaving an imprint on his friend. She finally agrees and invites him to go with her when the seeds start to float away. Jake is killed by a bolo thrown by a patrol of Omatakean warriors as he tries to keep up with his rescuer Neytiri, Zoe Saldana. Tsute, Liz Alonso, the next in line to the throne and the man Neytiri is anticipated to wed, is their leader. They are prevented from hurting Jake by Neytiri reminding them that Eywa has sent a sign. Tsute orders his warriors to deliver him to Eywa and Tashik, father, roughly spelled, mother. Neytiri's parents, Itukan, Westudi, and Moat, CCH Pounder, the tribe's king and queen, respectively, are shown Jake. Jake explains to the elders that he is a warrior, or dream walker, and that his goal is to gain knowledge from them. Jake is told by Moat, who pricked him in the chest and tasted his blood, that it is Eywa's intention for him to live with the Omatakeya and that Neytiri will teach him about their ways and customs, despite her reluctance. After a ceremonial gathering, Jake is taken to his bed, a leaf perched high in the home tree that cocoons him. Jake the human is revived as he drifts off to sleep. All the scientists at morning chow, including Grace, are listening intently to everything Jake has to say. Since Norm was Grace's original choice to form a link with the Omatakeya, he appears bitter and disillusioned. Even the military and business representatives have grown fond of Jake. Jake seems to be their greatest chance in persuading the Omatakeya to move or advising the colonel on how to force them to do so, since Hometree is perched above a sizable deposit of unobtanium. He is told he has 3 months to complete his task before the bulldozers show up. The next scenes center on Avatar Jake's training with Neytiri and human Jake's accounts of his experiences in the videologue he narrates at the conclusion of each day's activities. His dire horse, a significant animal to the NA6, is close to him. Jake needs to learn how to mount the creature so he can attach his neural network to its antenna. Human Jake keeps giving updates on the structure of the home tree and other NA6 information. Neytiri and Tsute frequently refer to Jake as Sksong, Skown, which he explains means moron, as he struggles to master his dire horse. Jake informs the colonel and Selfridge about the enormous home tree, the Omatakeya's residence. There is a significant unobtanium deposit beneath it. Jake explains to them how the 1,000-foot-tall tree is built. Jake asks to be given the opportunity to speak with the NA6 and persuade them to depart as Quaritch sees an opportunity to destroy the tree. Grace resolves to move her mining operation out of Dodge since she believes Quaritch, Selfridge, and the other members of the military department are manipulating Jake. She relocates them to the Hallelujah Mountains, a distant area of enormous, floaty islands that are revered by the NA6 and abundant in unobtanium. Grace wants to keep the RDA representatives and base personnel out of her territory. Jake describes how learning the NA6 language is like field stripping a weapon in his next videologue. He also talks about his language training. With enough practice, you can't help but pick it up. Scenes of his ongoing training with Neytiri, who instructs him on the relationship between the NA6 and the forest, are spliced in between these. She explains to Jake that all energy is borrowed and that we must return it at some point. Jake appears to understand this, and Neytiri informs him that he is prepared for a vital rite of passage, to link with and ride a Declan, a flying mountain banshee, as he prays for an animal he has just slain. Jake must travel to the highest section of the Hallelujah Mountains with Neytiri, Tsute, and 2 other NA6 trainees to find the banshee's nesting sites. This training is perilous due to a number of variables, including the height and fury of the wild banshees, but Jake's lack of fear and effective bond with his banshee win him the reluctant respect of the other NA6 warriors there, including Tsute. He establishes a connection with the tendrils in his queue before mounting the flying creature and remarking that, despite his lack of horsemanship, he was born to do this. To the Tree of Souls, the most revered site for the NA6, Jake, Neytiri, and the others ride together. The NA6 term for a big, vividly colored flying mountain banshee with homicidal intents against anything that flies is Turok. As Jake and Neytiri are flying on a hunting mission, they are unexpectedly chased and assaulted by Turok. The Turok's shadow, once seen, is typically the final shadow one ever gets to see, as its attack is almost invariably lethal, according to Neytiri, who also claims that its name means last shadow. Neytiri demonstrates to Jake the skeleton of a former Turok back at Hometree. She explains to him that the last Turok rider was her grandfather's great-grandfather, who used the animal to bring together the 5 NA6 tribes during a difficult period. The moniker Rider of the Last Shadow, Turok motto, would belong to such a person. When Jake returns to his human form, it is obvious that this most recent event has had an impact on him because he remarks, "Out there is the actual world, in here is the dream." The colonel approaches him and informs him that his assignment has been completed and that he is to return to Earth on that day. In keeping with his word, the colonel set up Jake to receive the care he requires to restore use of his legs. Jake requests a postponement of his departure since, in his words, he is almost ready to be initiated into the tribe and accepted as one of them, at which point he will be in a position to negotiate with the NA6 to relocate. The colonel consents. Jake discovers the NA6 believe that everyone has the potential to conceive twins while at a NA6 ritual. Neytiri takes Jake to the Tree of Voices, a site of worship, where they utilize their chants to form a connection with the tree. Jake is told by Neytiri that he can construct a bow out of the tree and that he can select a woman. Neytiri affirms that she has chosen Jake after Jake informs her that he has already made his decision. Jake wakes up back in the lab after their shared night sleep beneath the tree. Neytiri is woken up in the morning by fallen trees and then the sound of bulldozers. As the forest collapses around Neytiri, who is dragging and carrying Jake to safety, soldiers are moving forward. When Jake finally awakens, he climbs atop one of the bulldozers and tries to stop it, eventually breaking its camera system and drawing some gunfire. Jake is preparing to link with his avatar at their remote location. As more NA6 warriors arrive, The Colonel identifies Jake in his avatar form as the individual who attempted to obstruct their mission while watching movies back at the base. The sacred site is being destroyed as the bulldozers work. The NA6 in Hometree want war. Jake and Grace make a counter-argument. There is a heated discussion. After learning that Jake and Neytiri are permanently mated while he and Neytiri were engaged, Tsute attempts to assassinate Jake out of jealousy. Jake claims he has the right to talk because he is a NA6. The links between Jake and Grace's avatars and their real selves are abruptly severed by the irate Colonel, who arrests Jake for attempting to stop the bulldozers, causing both of their avatars to fall comatose. RDA and military brass are in conflict with Grace and Jake. Grace reveals that the NA6 can access the neurological network formed by Pandora's trees, which has more connections than the human brain does. The Omaticaya will therefore never leave Hometree. Parker and the Colonel talk about possibilities. To expel the NA6, he will attack Hometree and use gas bombs. Jake requests permission to go back to the Omaticaya and try to persuade them to leave, and he is given an hour to do so. No one wants Jake and Grace to come back. Neytiri turns down Jake. The Omaticaya, who are getting ready to fight against the humans, who have come in a sizable fleet of flying ships, have bound both Jake and Grace and left them behind. Gas cylinders are fired by the fleet into Hometree and the neighborhood. As the conflict intensifies, the majority of the weapons are directed against Hometree's root system, which is eventually brought down by a string of explosions and heavy artillery. There are several Omaticaya deaths. Jake and Grace are set free by Moat, who wants them to save the tribe. When Jake arrives and tries to comfort Neytiri, she rejects him once more. Itukan, Neytiri's father, is murdered by a sizable piece of shrapnel. As he passes away, he makes one final wish, that Neytiri take his sacred bow and take charge of their people. Suddenly, Jake and Grace return to their human form and are immediately detained for treason after what seems like infinite carnage. Additionally, Norm is detained for attempting to stop soldiers from turning off their avatar forms. At the Tree of Souls, the NA6 assemble. Trudy enters the room where Jake, Grace, and Norm are being held. By convincing their guard that she doesn't want anything to do with them, she then instantly kills the guard. Grace is shot by the Colonel as they are about to leave the base. The group takes a pod to another location in the forest after flying Trudy's spacecraft to the isolated facility in the floating mountains. Jake goes back to his virtual self. At first, the anticipated reunion with the Omaticaya is unsuccessful. Jake is an alien and an outcast. He therefore takes a risky course of action after realizing that he must go above and beyond in order to win back the NA6's trust. He calls forth his Banshee and departs in search of the Turok. Jake thinks that because the Turok never seeks out an attack above himself, he may be approached in that way, despite the fact that it is a simple strategy that can quickly lead to death. Jake leaps from his Banshee to the Turok's back. Next, at an Omatikayan ceremony at the Tree of Souls, we witness him approach there on a Turok. With the Turok, Jake has successfully formed a bond. The Omaticaya are astounded to witness the fulfillment of their greatest legend. When Jake dismounts, the NA6 people part to let him pass because they are in awe of him. Each extends an arm to the other as Neytiri approaches and says, "I see you." Jake accepts his new position as Turok motto from Tsute, who is now the head of the tribe. He respects Jake a great deal. In order to save Grace, who is dying, Jake persuades Moat. Grace's human and avatar bodies need to be placed to the Tree of Souls as part of the preparations, which are started by Moat. Grace's consciousness will be permanently transferred to her avatar. Grace must travel through the Eye of Eywa, and the Great Mother may decide to let her go through to become her avatar self, or she may decide to keep Grace with her. Although the ceremony is unsuccessful, Grace tells Jake that she has seen Eywa before she passes away. As Turok motto, broken-hearted and enraged Jake declares it's time to send a message to the Sky People that this is the NA6's territory. But in order to do so, they must first approach each NA6 clan and request that they join forces in battle. Tsute will take over as the Omatikayan's new clan head and aid in persuading other clans to join them in battle. The local NA6 population has increased from a few hundred to 2,000 in a day thanks to the human troops. The NA6 will soon reach 20,000, the colonel warns as he addresses his troops, at which time their perimeter will be overwhelmed. He goes on to say that they should launch a preventative attack now rather than letting that happen. They intend to use a space shuttle as the vehicle for a large bomb. The attack is scheduled for the following morning at 6 o'clock and is intended to target the Tree of Souls. They think that by taking down the Tree of Souls, the NA6 will leave and never return to this area. The Omaticaya are being organized by Jake. He stresses that people destroyed their mother, Earth, the being responsible for maintaining the balance of life, at the Tree of Souls, where he bonds with the tree using his Q and requests that Eywa check into Grace's memories. Jake is informed by Neytiri's appearance that Eywa is neutral. Quaritch builds up his fleet, primarily to defend the Valkyrie shuttle. The fleet and bomb ship advance toward the Tree of Souls. Beginning to approach from the air and on the ground is the united NA6 force. Tsute, Jake in his Toruk, and other warriors fight off military aircraft, mostly Scorpion assault ships. Injuries are increasing on both sides. Despite having unrivaled firepower, the gunships are no match for the Declans, who seize control of them and smash them into one another. Col. Quaritch's Dragonfly ship pursues and shoots at Jake, who is riding a Toruk. Trudy arrives and fires on the colonel's command ship. Neytiri's Banshee is shot down and killed. Norm's avatar is fatally wounded and transforms back into a human. Tsute attempts to take on the bomb ship but is killed in the attempt, and Trudy dies when her ship is destroyed in a hail of gunfire from Quaritch's Dragonfly. Neytiri stands on the ground and observes this happening. Jake tries to get in touch with Tsute and fails, as does his attempt to get in touch with Trudy. The bomb ship approaches the Tree of Souls in the meantime. Neytiri receives a communicator order from Jake to stop fighting. A battalion of Titan others, Pandora's heavily armored dinosaur-like animals, appear out of nowhere and charge the Earth soldiers through the remnants of the surrounding forest. They easily decimate soldiers wearing amp suits and infantry. Neytiri rejoins the battle with many other Pandoran species following her, delighted that Eywa had heard Jake's cry for assistance. A Venator approaches nearby and bows obediently to her. As the military's ground forces withdraw in confusion, Jake and his Toruk ascend to the air to engage the bomb ship. Jake approaches the bomb ship from above and grenades it. The blasts and flames smash far from the Tree of Souls. Jake also launches explosives at the command ship's weak spots. It starts to burn and fall. Col. Quaritch dons an amp suit and leaps off the command ship before it catches fire and burns to cinders. He discovers himself at the makeshift camp that Grace established. Jake is in his avatar pod inside the camp. Quaritch, who is out to murder Jake, is now being assaulted by a Venator Neytiri had linked with en route to the location. The colonel kills the Venator with the help of his amp suit, trapping Neytiri beneath it. Jake shows up in his avatar before the colonel has a chance to assassinate Neytiri. Jake is the colonel's avatar and is just equipped with a piece of pipe as they battle it out. The colonel is wearing an amp suit. The colonel removes the plastic canopy from the suit after Jake breaks it, dons a breathing mask, and asks Jake how it feels to have betrayed his people before heading toward the structures housing the pods. You believe that you belong to them. It's time to get up, he mocks as he crashes into the mobile lab in search of Jake's pod with the intention of eradicating both it and the human Jake. The conflict continues. Jake is hung from his queue in front of the colonel after being captured by an amp suit arm. Neytiri has nearly achieved freedom in the meantime. In an effort to kill Jake by cutting his throat, the colonel now pulls Jake closer to him and grabs his knife. Neytiri suddenly fires an arrow at the colonel, striking him square in the chest. Reeling, the colonel is unable to continue attacking Jake. The second arrow from Neytiri hits right next to the first. It knocks the colonel down in his amp suit. The facility, which is seeping into the planet's toxic atmosphere, has suffered significant damage. Jake the human is awake but having trouble breathing and tries to put on a mask. Neytiri shows up and assists Jake in donning his mask. She cradles Jake, the human, and murmurs, "I see you." It is the first time they had actually interacted. Most of the remaining humans are being herded back to Hell's Gate and put into a shuttle to be flown back to Earth, but a few Earthlings, like Norm and Dr. Patel, are invited to stay on Pandora. In his farewell videologue, Jake says goodbye and tells us that he has decided to permanently transfer his consciousness to his avatar. Jake awakens in his avatar with Neytiri keeping watch over him after passing through the eye of Eywa in a ritual akin to that of Grace.